This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Believe it or not, spring is just around the corner, but it's been a rough winter for farmers growing crops and raising livestock. Today, we hear about Connecticut farms and learn how farmers are getting ready for spring. Some new Connecticut farmers are growing some pretty unique crops. That's later. You don't want to miss it. But up first, Commissioner Brian Herbert joins us. He's with the Connecticut Department of Agriculture. Commissioner, thanks for being back with us.
Catherine, good morning. Thanks for having me.
And so, as you know, it's been a pretty intense year for farmers in so many different ways. So can you give us an update of what you've seen or what we've seen in the last year in regards to farming grants and federal funding and how all of that is impacting agriculture across the country?
Yeah. As you said, I think we're all ready for spring at this point. And I know Connecticut farmers have been busy all winter long in preparation for this. But I'll start off just by reminding listeners that agriculture in Connecticut's a $4 billion industry. We've got over 5,000 farms that work 370,000 acres of land. And we say from the ground to the sound, right? You got to include our oysters and clam operations down in Long Island Sound. As you mentioned, we've got people who put up crops. And people who care for livestock. And, when you think about caring for livestock, during these past snowstorms that we've had, think about going into calving season or lambing season and worrying about, the next generation of animals that you're going to be caring for when it's 15 degrees outside or, 3 feet of snow coming down on you. So it's, agriculture still is an important component of the Connecticut economy. Not only is it, keeping lands open and working, but also providing food, fiber, and feed for all of us. So we're ready for spring. We had, we moved the clocks forward. That's a good sign. Next week at the state capitol is Ag Day at the Capitol, and I hope members of the public join us there to listen and learn from some of our partner organizations. And I also want to point out that 2026 has been recognized as the International Year of the Woman Farmer. So we're highlighting the female farmers and leaders across the state through all of our social channels to make sure that people know their stories and have an opportunity to hear a little bit more about the women who are, working the farm.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to celebrate ahead, but we also did start off the year a little rough, especially when it comes to federal funding and grants and whatnot. So can you give us an idea of how that has been impacting local agriculture here?
Yeah, we've been rolling out our grants. Just a couple of weeks ago, we announced over 40 grants, farm transition grants to Connecticut farmers. 25 of those were to new and beginning farmers in our micro grant program to really give them a start. The micro grant program is it's a great way for new and beginning farmers who, and new and beginning, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean 22 and 23-year-olds. It could be a second career. It could be, somebody who's transitioning into farming full time. But, a lot of those folks have, exhausted all of their personal capital, their friends and family capital. They're not quite ready to go to a bank, for an investment. But our micro grant program is up to $5,000 for them to really accelerate the growth. And we hear the stories from the awardees about how important it was in their career path as a farmer. We're very concerned about what's happening in DC, and monitoring where the funds are. USDA is down, 20,000 people. And so what does that mean in Connecticut? Well, it means the offices at the Natural Resource Conservation Service, USDA and RCS, are down 30%. Connecticut was down, I think, the second highest amount in the nation. So who are those people? Why does that matter to me? Well, those are the people who put together your conservation plans for farmers to make sure that they're working the lands well. They're the ones who process the grants for farmers or write contracts or do soil science and testing for the farm. So when there's nobody in that office, it just makes it harder for a Connecticut farmer to do the work that they need to do and get the resources that they need to. So we're concerned about that. I'm happy to hear that the Farm Bill got out of committee last week. I don't think it's a perfect Farm Bill. Haven't seen a perfect Farm Bill, but we haven't had a Farm Bill now in so many years that at this point, I think everybody's just desperate for something to get the industry back on track and refresh public policy so that's keeping in with the times that we need it to.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the USDA because 24,000 people have left USDA since President Trump took office, as you mentioned. So that also, just to give listeners a better idea of what that means, on top of what you just shared, is reduction in staff at the National Agricultural Statistics Service and the Food and Nutrition Service, which operates food benefits. So that includes the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And so with everything that you just mentioned that has been impacted, which are several, I think another big one is farming education, because I believe the National Institute of Food and Agriculture provides funding to land-grant universities to do research and extension programs and that allow them to work on agricultural and environmental issues. Is this something that you're seeing impacting Connecticut specifically, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, we're very concerned. You've got Mackenzie on, who's a great partner over at Yukon Extension and the College of Ag Health and Natural Resources. Very concerned about the cuts to higher education. When you think about it, there's a lot of technology in agriculture. When we talk about climate smart agriculture, when we talk about precision agriculture, somebody's got to do the research to make sure that it works well, right? It's a big risk for a farmer to try something new that has been tested when your entire lifeline and livelihood is in that field or in that crop. So having really strong pillars of higher education that are doing the research, that are doing the testing, and then like extension services, going out in the field and training farmers how to implement that research that they've learned or share it out is huge. I believe Yukon has lost some funding over the past couple of years, especially during this administration. We're excited that I think we're coming to the end of the selection search for the new dean of the College of Ag Health and Natural Resources. We've had an interim dean for about 9 months now to help get be a permanent full-time champion for the college, but also talk about how well they provide services to the industry and therefore the residents of the state.
Well, and so we've been talking about how all of these actions have impacted farmers, but also, of course, impacting the consumer, as it's a cycle
Right.
here. And of course, many Americans are reporting a higher grocery bill, and that seems to be happening a lot more over the last couple of years. So how do these actions at the federal level, as you described, and what's happening overseas impact the price of food?
Yeah, well, food is expensive to put together, right? I mean, I think we've got to just acknowledge that the amount of time and energy is significant. And when you're doing smaller scale production, like what we generally do in Connecticut, right? Diversified farm operations. So you grow, 20, 30, 40, 50 different types of vegetables, 2 dozen types of, apples or peaches or pears, all of that stuff. Your economy of scale is a little bit more challenging when you go out to, say, California, where you've got, hundreds of acres of, lettuce. And so the cost of production is higher in Connecticut. But we have a consumer that, for a lot of parts in the state have the ability to afford a higher cost and understand the value of having a farm in their community or in the next, the community next door. But we also have programs like the Farmers Market Nutrition Program or SNAP doubling at farmers markets, where we are supporting consumers with opportunity to purchase Connecticut-grown products at farmers markets and farm stands, and extending their purchasability. And so, what's great about that program, the Farmers Market Nutrition Program and SNAP doubling, is it takes farmers and farmers markets and put them in urban communities or communities that might not have the same access to fresh produce. And it gives them buying power. So it draws the farmer into, say, a Bridgeport or a Hartford, where they might not otherwise go. So the consumer is getting great food without impacting the grocery budget, and the farmer is getting full retail price, at markets that supports their operation. So it's really important that if you're eligible for WIC or SNAP, or if you're a senior, that you use our farmers market nutrition program, enroll, and make sure that you take advantage of those dollars. I'll just close on FMNP with saying the past 2 years have been the highest years ever for redemption at farmers markets in the 40-year history of the program in Connecticut. In 2024, we did over $1 million in redemptions. And in 2025, we did just over $900,000 in redemptions. Put in perspective, we used to be between $600,000 and $650,000, so a huge leap. So what does that tell us? One, it tells us that people need access to these dollars. But also it tells us that there's a strong reason for farmers to be at markets that use FMNP because the consumer's there and willing to support them.
And there's some behind the scenes action going on with Connecticut farmers as well earlier this year where they rallied against tax increases. And so after farmers were surveyed in 2025, so the land use values skyrocketed after this. And some farmers said that these tax increases would have put their farms out of business. So can you talk about what happened there? How often are these
Yeah.
surveys done and what are they for?
Yeah, so Catherine, you're referencing to the PA 490 program, and so landowners and farmers are very familiar. A lot of people in town halls are very familiar. In 1963, the state legislature said it's really important that we have open space and working lands across the state of Connecticut as we were developing and kind of suburbanizing, and so they created a tax break for property taxes for these landholders. And the state sets the assessment rate, the land use value, that every town therefore uses for farmland or open space, forest land. And we recently added maritime heritage land, which is our oyster operations and clam operations down Long Island Sound. So over the course of 2025, we did surveys. Actually, the Zwick Center at the University of Connecticut sent out postcards to farmers asking them to fill out their land rent use or values. And unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of responses. So it was extended not once, but twice. It was supposed the survey was really only intended to be open for 30 days. It was open for almost 5 months. And with the lack of responses, we then went to emails and emailed, I should say, the Zwick Center went to emails, and 300 farmers received an email 3 times asking them to participate. What we've seen over historically with the survey responses is that we're getting fewer and fewer responses with fewer and fewer points, data points in them. Clearly, folks were upset when the rates were announced back in October. We realized there was an error in the calculation, which we revised and re-released the rates in January. Unfortunately, at that point, I think there was a lot of confusion and a lot of uncertainty. And so, with the governor's leadership, he said, let's just put a pause on this. Let's get it right. So he reset the rates back to the 2020 recommended land use. So nobody's seeing an increase. They're seeing, stability. And he convened the PA 490 working group. So there's just about 20 of us. Over half the working group are farmers and landowners, forest owners. And we've got the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, us, the Office of Policy and Management, to talk about what are better ways we can do this, because the surveys just don't seem to be getting the response that we need to make informed decisions. And so is there a different way we can do this? So we'll be looking at what other states do. We'll be pulling from the ideas of the members in the agricultural community to see if they have other suggestions. And we're going to do that work over the course of the next couple months. And then, depending on what the path forward is, will depend on when the next set of recommended land use values are released. But it's a good conversation to have. The PA 490 has been around for 60 years. They've never changed. We've never changed how we go about this. And a lot has changed across the state in terms of agriculture and who's owning the land and who's renting the land. So probably not the reason that we would have wanted to do this, but in the end, it is a good reason. It is a good thing to do, and I'm really hopeful for the recommendations that the group puts forward for us all to consider.
Well, we'll definitely have to come back to that and get an update from you
Mhm.
once that concludes. And I know we have to let you go now, but last question here. We mentioned that there has been a number of grants that were recently awarded to Connecticut farmers, and it's also specifically to strengthen their operation and diversify production. So, is there a conscious effort to bring some more diverse livestock and crops to Connecticut?
Uh, Catherine, I feel like I should have paid you for this question, given how much work we do on diversity, but I didn't for everybody's awareness. No, our theme at the department is resiliency through diversity. And that means a lot of things. As we learned during the pandemic, to have a resilient food system, you have to have a diverse food system. And so that means we've got to be doing more things more differently in the state of Connecticut. So diversity through how we farm. We've done climate smart and precision agriculture farming and provided grants for that effect. Where you're farming, we're doing more grants to new and beginning farmers. We're preserving smaller acres of parcel through our farmland preservation program. What you're farming, we want to make sure that what is being grown in Connecticut represents the diverse population we have, but also gives farmers an opportunity to grow something that you might not find at a supermarket, and another reason to visit that farm stand or farmer's market, and how they're selling their products. So we're investing in value-added processing. Think about taking tomatoes and making salsa or tomato sauce, cucumbers into pickles. So our theme has been under this administration, resiliency through diversity, to make sure that farmers have a broad base of revenue opportunities to meet the needs of the state of Connecticut. And that also means we want to, I mentioned the International Year of the Woman Farmer. We want to change or increase the diversity of who's at the table, and bring in new farmers, second generation farmers, or I'm sorry, second career farmers, first generation farmers, and make sure that there's a spot for them and that they have access to these markets as well. We've also done things like Connecticut Growing for Connecticut Kids, which is our farm to school program. The first time the state has consciously and consistently put money into farm to school programming to connect students with their food, connect farmers with school cafeterias, and make sure that we have another outlet for Connecticut farmers to sell into. I could do about 45 minutes on that, but I know you've got a great group of guests that are coming up behind me, and I want to make sure they have plenty of time to talk about what they're doing and what they're thinking about for the coming months. But Catherine, thank you so much for the time today and for the topic.
Well, I appreciate you previewing the next couple of segments for me there. Appreciate your time. And I will have you know that one of our producers is craving some ginger production. So add that to your list, Commissioner, and we'll come
All
back
right,
with you
will
and get an
do.
update on that. You've been listening
Thank you.
to Commissioner Brian Herbert, who's the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, or with the Connecticut Department of Agriculture. Commissioner, thank you so much for being on Where We Live today. And for our listeners, let us know if you have a local farm to shout out. We love hearing from them. Maybe you're working on a farm here in Connecticut. Let us know what your story is. Email us wherewelive@ctpublic.org or give us a call, 888-720-9677. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. The key to a prosperous farm community here in Connecticut is diversifying your crops. More local farmers are working to bring new products to market and maybe inspire your taste buds along the way. Joining us is Spencer Lord. He's the owner of Oracle Mushroom Company in Kent. And yes, today we're talking about fungi. Spencer, welcome to Where We Live.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine.
And also joining us is Mackenzie White. She's a specialist based at the Yukon Extension College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. Mackenzie, welcome back to Where We Live.
Good morning, Catherine. Thank you for having me.
And listeners, let us know if you have a favorite farm or vendor that you want to give a shout out for. We want to hear it, 888-720-9677, or email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. So, Mackenzie, we just heard from the Connecticut Department of Agriculture. Anything that the commissioner shared jumped out to you that you would like to respond?
Yeah, it's just it's been a tough winter, that's for sure. And he mentioned pause on different grants and whatnot. But speaking from a livestock farmer perspective and a service provider working with livestock farmers, it's definitely been a doozy of a winter with the extreme temperatures and then just the extreme precipitation with the heavy snowstorms that we've had. So definitely a tough winter, but these warm days ahead are really reassuring and exciting. So a lot to look forward to this spring.
So, what are some of the things that you yourself look for to prepare when we are experiencing record snow and extreme cold temperatures? Is it to make sure that the livestock are safe indoors? Do you have extra feed, or what are some of the things that you think about that perhaps we don't think about?
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot of prep work that kind of goes into having livestock because having livestock or raising or caring for livestock, it's a year-round thing. It's not seasonally operation thing. It's more or less there's a lot of prep in terms of making sure there's plenty of feed because with the colder temperatures, the animals' energy needs kind of increase. So you got to plan for having extra feed or, making sure they have plenty of dry bedding or in their shelters or, some farms only use natural shelters. So making sure, everything's ready in that sense. And then, of course, I think Commissioner mentioned, winter can tend to be peak birthing season. So making sure there's plenty of stuff on hand that you need, whatever it may be, whether it's, heat lamps or blankets or, like I said, extra dry bedding, extra supplies to care for those newborns once they do arrive.
And when it comes to livestock, what kind of livestock are you working with, and how do different breeds respond to extreme weather like what we saw this season?
Yeah, so not really limited to anything, but mostly focusing on beef cattle, sheep, swine, goats, and others. But that's kind of my target area right now.
And does that add to the complication of preparation? Or, of course, that's part of your planning naturally, but does that add to the difficulties or challenges when it comes to that extreme weather shift, cold and heat?
Not necessarily. I mean, it does. It's a dependent on what you have on your operation, really. Because the more species you have, you may have, the more pens you have, the more requirements you may have. So it's really just dependent on how your operation is really set up here in Connecticut.
And as we heard from the commissioner earlier, there is an effort to diversify crops and livestock here in the state. What are you seeing yourself?
Yeah, so there's farmers are entrepreneurs, as you probably have heard or a lot of you are aware of. So a lot of farms are just, trying to figure out how to diversify, trying to be proactive. What kind of products can they add? Or what can they do with their products that they have? Or possibly, they've been focusing on strictly a certain species of livestock for so many years, and they're ready to try something new or incorporate something different into their system. Maybe they've just had smaller livestock and they're ready to incorporate cattle or vice versa. I actually worked with a certain cattle farmer who's had cows for over 30 years. And he's really starting to scratch his head and wonder, how can I start to incorporate sheep into my operation? I really think, I want to get better with my rotational grazing plan. And I really think the sheep could really help with my system. So, just like, thinking of these different considerations and trying to be proactive. And then, like with other farmers, they're just, trying to be smarter with how they get their products or their animals processed, making sure they get more of the cuts that the people are buying or purchasing at the farm stand or at the farmer's market. Just trying to stay on top of it, trying to stay proactive, just many different things.
Well, going into the many different things, Spencer, I want to go to you next. Spencer Lord, who's the owner of Oracle Mushroom Company in Kent. How did this start for you? Where did your passion for mushrooms start?
Growing up, I was always kind of embedded in nature. And then probably about 10 years ago, I was introduced to foraging. And, one thing led to another. I started experimenting with a lot of different mushrooms that I could find, which I kind of want to add a little caveat. You should really kind of, get somebody who knows what they're doing before you go out there and just start picking mushrooms in the woods. But anyway, so I kind of got introduced to that. And what I found was there's this amazing culinary diversity that nature provides. However, we're kind of limited to, just a few months out of the year that you can even really find these, delicacies. So one thing kind of led to another. Next thing you know, I'm trying some of these, grow kits that you can get and grow them on your counter, and, with minimal success. But then, I felt like, well, I could definitely, get better at this. Let me try my hand at refining some of these environmental conditions a little bit. And here we are. Probably about, I started growing a little bit about 5 years ago, and we really took off with the business 3 years ago.
Well, it's sort of a long process here, but really rewarding, it seems like. Curious to hear, what were those initial experiences foraging like for you? Were you immediately hooked, or is your familiarity with nature, did it feel like home? What was that like for you?
Well, growing up, in the woods, mushrooms were always kind of like the garnish on the entree. Like, I never really paid much attention to them, but they were there. And then, about 10 years ago, I was struck by these some amazing specimens that I kind of saw, and they really, caught my eye. And I started to research them a little bit and found out, that there is an abundance around here, and it's really it's been a very interesting, frustrating at times, but very rewarding kind of experience, especially learning the different types of mushrooms. And then, it also doesn't hurt that it seems like, at least in our country right now, we're kind of going through this kind of mushroom renaissance, in the sense that it seems like they're being introduced into culinary applications more and more. You have, the health benefits of them, which are, taking kind of the supplement industry by storm. And then you even have the application of, the therapeutic applications using psychedelics. So in multiple ways, they are kind of jumping to the forefront of our culture. And it's, they're having a bit of a moment right now. So we kind of saw this wave coming a few years ago, and decided, it would probably be advantageous for us to kind of jump on this at that time. And it's been nothing but exceptionally well received by the community.
When you mentioned trying to grow some on your counter, did not go so well. And we often talk about, when we talk about farming, we picture crops, I think, growing in the field. But growing mushrooms, it sounds like it's a little bit different. So what does the cultivating process look like?
So we grow our mushrooms indoors, and that allows us to, one, offer them year round to everybody. So we don't just end, once the cold weather hits. But growing them indoors also allows us to really hone in the environmental conditions that are required. And they are extremely specific, and it's kind of a narrow window that they can exist in. So, we control all the way down to humidity, light, temperature, and then even down to like carbon dioxide concentration in the grow rooms, as mushrooms are, breathe oxygen just like we do. So it's a very dialed in system. And kind of even with these extreme temperatures that we've been encountering, yes, they're indoors, but the ambient temperatures, especially when you're, hitting these negative numbers, or, wind chills that are like -40, it influences the inside temperature pretty significantly.
So lots of elements to think about. And I want to bring in Matt Wendt, who is the president of the New Connecticut Farmer Alliance and also owner of River Ridge Farm. Matt, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And so just following with what we just heard from Spencer, seems to be lots of new products coming on, lots of new farmers coming on to the agricultural scene and working to expand the local products available here in Connecticut. Tell us, what are you seeing? Is that something that you're seeing a lot these days?
Over the past few years, we definitely have seen a surge of interest in people either getting into the agricultural industry or wanting to start their own farms. I think that the New Connecticut Farmer Alliance is a group of almost fully first-generational farms, and a lot of veteran farmers, a lot of BIPOC farmers. So we are seeing more interest, but the issues really come about with how uncertain things are, whether that be with the weather or the economy or costs, like fuel that we're seeing right now. So I think the biggest thing is whether it's already hard to farm. So how supportive both the public and the state is to helping farmers succeed, I think has been the real make or break moment for whether farms can get off the ground or not. So many of our farmers in our group are not farming as their only source of income, and I think that speaks volumes.
Well, I think you just gave us a really good picture of the reality. We have had multiple conversations with farmers on the show, and it seems to be where most farmers come from a place of love to grow, but they also need to have support in order to continue that growing. So we'd love to get sort of your origin story here too. How did you get started in farming here in Connecticut?
I actually got started farming in northern New England in terms of where I first got into it. Maine had a pretty fantastic apprenticeship program where you could work on a farm and kind of learn the ropes. And I did that for a few years. And growing up in Meriden, I actually saw a lot of old dairy farms go to housing developments around me. And I think that kind of sparked something in the back of my mind that once I got back into farming, I knew I wanted to come back down here to be able to farm. I think it's an interesting dichotomy in New England, where in northern New England you have very cheap land prices, and so it's much easier to start a farm. There's also a slight cultural difference in terms of people going and shopping with their local farms first, and then kind of supplementing with the grocery store. The issue up there is that there's just not as many people. And so down here in southern New England and Connecticut especially, you have tons of people in a market that is kind of wide open and capable of financially supporting a lot of farms. But you have high land prices and high cost of living that really kind of prevents people from getting started. And so, you have a lot of multi-generational farms that have been around for a while. And they're, season to season, they do better and worse, but tend to be pretty stable. It's just a bit difficult to get your feet under you when farming in this state.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that you are seeing sort of a spirit of diversity or diversifying crops and livestock. During your experience, what are some of the other changes have you seen across farming communities since you've been doing this?
The thing we like to say as farmers, when it comes to climate change, especially, is no more normal. So instead of it being specifically like a warming pattern or something very specific, things have gotten more chaotic. So farmers love to plan this time of year where if we haven't planned yet, we're like finishing our plans and getting ready to execute on the season. But it's hard to plan for things when you have no idea what's coming for you, whether that's 3 feet of snow or, it's tomorrow it's going to be in the 70s. And then by the end of the week, it's going to be back down to freezing. So like, it's that sort of, unreliability in the weather that it makes it harder to plan for growing. So we do whatever we can. We build greenhouses, we have row cover for crops, we have sprinkler systems. I think we all remember a few years ago when we had a frost mid-May and all of the orchards were kind of losing their minds trying to save all of the flowers so they had fruit for the season. And I know of some farmers that lost all of a single crop. So that's why we're also diversifying, like not just having peaches or apples, but throwing in blueberries and elderberries and other things that can kind of, if you lose one thing, you're not losing everything. But with that comes, it's much more difficult to manage. As Brian Herbert said, that, the margins are thin. And when you try to do a lot of things, it's hard to make a lot of money off of one particular thing. So it just adds to that challenge. Farming is hard enough, and we're living at a time when it feels harder. So I think, changing people's minds and getting them to think about going first and shopping locally with their farms. I think that's the biggest help people can do. Like financially, it's the toughest thing farming. So the more support we have of people buying our products, I think the easier it'll be on all of us.
Well, shopping local is definitely a theme that many of our farmers have shared with us and we've shared on the show here. And I'm glad you mentioned flowers. I have a comment here that I would like to share with everyone and probably have everyone respond in some way. Kyle from Woodbury wanted to note that horticulture, meaning farming not for consumption, is also a large part of the industry and wanted to make sure that we talk about that too. And I think there's a rising interest in farming not for consumption, having a garden at home. There's a rising interest in sort of planting your own sort of planter boxes in your backyard or on your balcony. And I think I'm going to start with Matt here, since we just ended with you. Have you seen an interest in people wanting to just kind of get their hands in the dirt?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think we do seedling starts, and we've seen a lot of interest in certain crops, but more interest overall. And we also we do grow a lot of food, fruits and vegetables, but we also grow cut flowers as well, and that becomes a big part of our overall farming plan, whether that be at farmers markets or in our farm stands, having something pretty to go along with the food.
And Spencer, sort of touching on the rising interest in general with sort of flora and fauna. I think a lot of the mushrooms that you grow is so cool, but I think getting into a new space can be a little intimidating. So when you're at a farmer's market, what are the conversations like you have with the public about using mushrooms in their cooking, or if they want to grow mushrooms?
So I'd say 90% of our conversations at farmers markets are with people who have never encountered mushrooms like ours. One reason being that they don't have the same longevity of shelf life as the kind that you see in the grocery store. But they also don't ship super well. So traveling, any type of considerable distance can kind of damage them. They're pretty fragile. So the majority of our conversations at these farmers markets, aside from our regulars, are talking to people about how they can cook these, for the first time. And, well, I've got this kind of meal. How do I work them in? It's a lot of educating. And people get excited about it. Like, they literally say, like, I'm really excited to take these home and go try out, these different cooking methods. And, when you carry these beautiful, we're very delicate when we handle them. So, we don't want them to be damaged in any way, because honestly, there is kind of an aesthetic component to eating that we really kind of gravitate towards. And honestly, our customer base really seems to appreciate that and value that. And it's something that, we feel very fortunate to be able to sell directly to consumers at farmers markets, because we get to see that excitement. It makes these kind of hard times a little bit more bearable and tolerable. When we get to see the excitement. There's not a single farmer's market that goes by that we don't have someone stopping by to take pictures. There at least multiple times, a farmer's market. Can I take pictures of these? Can I, is that okay? It's like, of course it is. Absolutely. And honestly, they are beautiful. And it's an aspect of the business that is, it's often looked over, the aesthetic component, but it is a very integral part of the dining experience. And these people are very excited to introduce that into their homes and their kitchens.
Well, it's really exciting to hear excitement for mushrooms. I love mushrooms in my food, in my soup, and all that jazz. And I just never thought I would see mushrooms as an aesthetic. So now I'm never going to see mushrooms the same way again. So it's really fun. It's really fun to hear that. And I've got to go to break soon, but Mackenzie, would love to get some thoughts from you too in terms of what Spencer and Matt has shared, and also this idea that there's this growing interest in horticulture or farming in general.
Yeah, there's definitely, just to comment on the comment that was shared, horticulture is actually a very, very huge part of Connecticut agriculture indeed. So kudos to the person that submitted that. But also, yeah, there's definitely even a growing interest in carrying and raising for livestock, of course. And after COVID, or during COVID, I think more and more people kind of went and bought local chicks to start a little small flock in their backyards to have access to food, but definitely a growing interest in growing your own food and raising your own food. But of course, whenever somebody is interested in starting a livestock operation, be sure to do your research. get some education on it, because it's not just a trial and error thing. There's a lot that goes into it. So.
You'll be listening to Mackenzie White, Spencer Lord, and Matt Wendt, and they will all be staying with us after a quick break. Spring is coming, believe it or not. Let us know if you have a favorite farm stand near you. Give us a call, 888-720-9677. You can also email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. We're talking to local farmers today, and we got another email from a farm for those specifically looking for fresh ginger, including myself. We are Vibrant Farm, a certified naturally grown vegetable farm that operates year-round. We grow and harvest ginger for the fall season, and it's widely popular among our customers here in Litchfield County. We got it sprouting now, and we'll plant it in our greenhouse in about a month. It's one of my favorite crops. Well, thank you so much. Again, that is Vibrant Farm in Litchfield County. Thank you for your message, and we'll be sure to check that out. And back with us is Mackenzie White, Spencer Lord, and Matt Wendt. Spencer, I'm going to kick off with you here because you are the recipient of a Connecticut Department of Agriculture grant. Can you tell us how you're hoping to expand with that grant? Because it does sound like you're branching out beyond mushrooms.
Yes. So, I like that there's this kind of diversity theme that's kind of worked its way into the show, and reason being because last year we actually branched into pasture raised poultry, more specifically duck. So we've been offering duck as kind of an additional kind of farm component, mostly for the meat, but we also offer eggs. But a good portion of our grant that we received from the Department of Agriculture was devoted to the expansion of our pasture-raised poultry operation, down to solar-powered fencing, processing equipment, even a chest freezer. But the majority of the grant that we received was actually for a larger autoclave for us to incorporate into our mushroom farm. And the reason that we have this autoclave, it's a 200 liter, it's quite sizable, but our substrate blocks that we grow the mushrooms out of, while our conditions in our grow rooms are perfect for growing mushrooms, unfortunately, it's also perfect for other things to grow, whether it's molds or other fungi or even bacteria or yeast. So we have to kind of combat that preemptively by heat treating these blocks that we grow them out of. And up until now, we've pretty much used a steam pasteurization system. And this larger autoclave will allow us to high pressure steam sterilize our substrate, which will allow us to really kill off a significantly larger portion of these other undesirables that could be in the substrate. And that would actually increase our yields and success, and it'll allow us to kind of grow at the rate that we would like, a lot more so than having to constantly struggle with contamination.
We've got so many more questions about diversifying crops and livestock, but have limited time here, so we'll definitely have to come back to this at some point. But Spencer, before we go to the next question, is why ducks specifically?
So we do a lot of farmers markets. We do about 5 in Litchfield County. And we have yet to come across anyone really commercially raising ducks. And since we're kind of already in this niche kind of component with the mushrooms, we're working with these gourmet restaurants and these kind of higher end grocery markets. So it seemed like kind of an organic transition to be able to move these to the same kind of clientele. So we kind of jumped on this bandwagon, and it's been amazing. It's one heck of a learning experience, but it's been super well received as well. And it's all about kind of finding these holes that need to be filled, and this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it's really fun hearing that. That's the angle you decided to go to, because we have conversation a lot on the team how ducks are not very common, I think, in American cuisine, whereas it is quite common in other cultures. So I'll be curious to see how that develops in the future. And Mackenzie, another question or another sentiment that we hear a lot is, I love to buy from my local farm, but I don't know where it is or what they're selling. Where can listeners find more information about their local farms?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, there's plenty of places to look for. I mean, of course, if you're not just driving down the road and see it, but Yukon Extension, along with other service provider agencies, have created these more or less directories or online sources to go to. Number one, there's the Connecticut Grown Map, which is based off of the Connecticut Department of Ag's website. So you can look up all sorts of different listings, all different food products, including livestock farms. And then Yukon Extension has a wonderful program called Grown Connected, which solely focuses just kind of on the northeast corner of the state. But there's a bunch of different other directories as well. CT NOFA, the Organic Association, shares all of theirs. I'm sure Matt with NICFA, they have their listing somewhere. So, yeah, and just through word of mouth as well, too. But with us service providers, we have a lot of listings available for the consumers and the community throughout the state to look at, to find their closest farm, or find the product they're looking for, more or less.
Well, and for our listeners kind of scrambling to scribble all this information down, we will have this available on ctpublic.org/where we live that you can check out.
Sorry, that's quick.
No, but it's a great way to sort of give people an idea of, what they can look out for and what to expect. And actually, Matt, next question, or this question's for you too, in terms of, we threw a lot of information out there for our listeners today, but what would you like them to take away from this conversation today? And any advice on how to find their local farm?
Yeah, I would mirror that. CT Grown is the Department of Ag's kind of local food brand. We actually just got certified organic, and they're going to be launching a CT Grown organic kind of sub brand. And so with that, we're hoping to potentially get into more grocery stores and try to work with some of the bigger chains to have local sections. But I think checking out your local farmers markets a great.
Ooh, did we just lose Matt? So it sounds like we might have lost some voices here, but I do want to take a moment today to thank our guest, Mackenzie White, who is with the Yukon Extension College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. We also had Spencer Lord, who's the owner of Oracle Mushrooms Company in Kent here in Connecticut, and also Matt Wendt, president of the New Connecticut Farmer Alliance and also owner of River Ridge Farm. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Gina Matruda. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And thank you all so much for listening.